we're going to continue working through this crazy concept of dating, which if you aren't doing it right now, you're saving yourself a lot of headache and heartache and stress and Instagram fan accounts. Not that that's directed to anyone in the room, but some of you will probably do this in high school or whether you wait for post-high school, which is a really great choice. But I'll start out tonight with asking you if you have ever jumped into a relationship that ended badly. Now, I mean, nobody saw that coming, kind of Lifetime movie bad. And it doesn't have to be romantic. We got a couple hands. So I sort of ran into one of these. This is some of you are going to fall over when I say this, but I'm going to tell you the story of my Alaskan stalker. Now, I know when you look at 41-year-old Greg, you're like, who would stalk this guy? And I wondered the same thing, and yet it happened. So, oh, that's clever. Clever. All right. So, when I was in college, I was in Wasilla, Alaska, which is now famous as the home of Sarah Palin. But it's north of Anchorage, and this is Wasilla Lake. This is kind of like the middle of down. Looks like there. I'm going to pick up this other handheld mic so that it's on the stream because the earpiece is not working anymore. So Wasilla, I was up there for 2 summers. It's this great little place in the middle of nowhere, and I'm switched over. Thank you, friends. This was back when I was young and interesting, like a whole lifetime ago. Literally, this was before any of you were born, because I'm old now. So, I kind of like to shift it up. We did a lot of different things with both the churches in the free time. If we weren't in the middle of a project, we were in a river. That's a 30-pound red salmon. I think that goes for $20 a pound at Publix, but up there it was just in the river. Say what? Oh, you're so sweet. What do you want? All right. We went on this retreat I'm about to show you a picture of, we went whitewater rafting, but when you go whitewater rafting in Alaska, you have to wear a dry suit, not even a wetsuit, because the river water is 34 degrees. It was the Nanana River, which is super fun to say. But here's this group of students that we took on one of our events. This was kind of the core youth group. This is up kind of close to Mount McKinley, Denali area. But from this student group, unbeknownst to me, there was a girl, Brady, a girl who apparently became oddly attached to me, and I didn't know it. So a couple months after this picture was taken, I moved to Texas to go to seminary. Focus. I moved to Texas to go to seminary. And about a couple years into my time there, one of the people from this church, moved to Texas and went to college 10 minutes from my church. And I'm like, oh, great, someone I can trust and have a built-in helper. Or so I thought. So life was kind of normal. She didn't have a car because when you move from Alaska to anywhere, you don't take a car. That's a pretty long drive. And so I had to drive her around a lot in town, which was fine. I didn't think anything of it because I was stupid. And somewhere around Christmas break, she confessed her undying love to me. And I was like, thanks, but no thanks. And it kind of went downhill. Later that spring, at one point, no. Later that spring, at one point, I actually, I was in a parking lot, and I watched her winding through the parking lot looking for my car. And it just gets, weirder and weirder. She had literally moved to Texas from Alaska to follow me. And that's, super weird. So we had to put a stop to that. That was a kind of creepy thing that we had to end. But I would never have guessed that that's where that would have gone. This one person that I was nice to, that I was trying to be helpful to, that turned out to try and be some sort of a Lifetime movie sequel for me. And I think there were some red flags along the way, I guess the first one being her confessing her undying love in the middle of a Starbucks. And I was I don't know, 4-ish, 5-ish years older than her. Sometimes age differences can be a red flag, sometimes not. Not always. I'll try and minimize the inside jokes. I'm sorry. All right. But there were red flags along the way where if I'd been paying attention, I could have saved everybody a lot of stress and heartache and creep factor, right? But sometimes we get into these relationships, these friendships, these dating relationships, and we think, because in the moment things are fantastic, we think that we know where they're going to go, we think we know where they're going to end, but the future is always unknown, right? James says it really well in James 4:13, where we read, "Come now, you who say today or tomorrow we'll travel to such and such a city and spend a year there and do business and make profit, yet you don't know what tomorrow will bring. For you are like vapor that appears for a little while, then vanishes. Instead, you should say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. But as it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil, so it is sin to know the good and yet not do it." So here's how this starts to tie in. This isn't just about financial forecasting. This isn't about like business decisions exclusively. This is about depending on the future instead of depending on God. So what are the people in this little parable saying? They're saying, today or tomorrow we're going to travel to do this, and then we're going to do that, we're going to do this, and we're going to do business, we're going to make a profit. And his whole point is, you don't know that you have tomorrow. There is no tomorrow that's guaranteed. Now, that doesn't mean it's like bad to plan, right? You should, like those of you who want to go to college after high school, you need to be like keeping your grades up now. It's not bad to do that in preparation for that. It's not bad to practice before you get to your first game. It's not bad to save money for your first car. None of those things are bad. But what's not okay is to depend on the future, to bank on the future, to make all your decisions as though the future is certain, right? So it's okay to practice before a game. It is not okay to not do your homework because when I get signed, my grades won't matter. I mean, one of you might get signed one day, but we won't talk about what the odds of that are. Hey, that doesn't make it bad. Let's just have real talk up in here, right? So the point is not that working for the future is bad. It's when you depend on it as if it's written in stone. And where that gets us into trouble in dating is, let's see how many of us have heard a friend say, well, I'm going to marry her, so it doesn't matter. It's going to last with this guy, so it doesn't matter, right? Yet, verse 14, let's bring it back together. I know I stirred that pot, but let's bring it back together. Verse 14, yet you don't know what tomorrow will bring, what your life will be. For you're like a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, well, before I get there, life is shorter than we think. And I'm not just saying that because I'm old. When I had a very good friend who was driving to school in her senior year of high school, and a guy cut her off. She rolled in the median. She was thrown from the car and died instantly, and he drove on never even knowing it happened. Courtney was not living her life banking on tomorrow, but she was living her life investing in tomorrow. 10 people came to Christ at her memorial service. She didn't know she was going to die that day, right? She had some weird stuff happen with her car before, but like this was totally unexpected. And there's a lot of God in that story. Maybe we'll unpack that another time. But just because we are young, and I'm saying we because in the grand scheme of things, I'm not old yet. Just because we are young doesn't mean that we are promised tomorrow, that we can control tomorrow, but we can act wisely today. Verse 15, instead you should say, if the Lord wills, we'll live and do this or that. Now, here's the trap we don't fall into. This is not some sort of magic formula. You also can't control the future by taking everything you say and putting these words in front of it. If the Lord wills, tomorrow I will have peanut butter for lunch. Also a bad thing to say if you have a peanut allergy. I mean, the Lord might heal you, but maybe you shouldn't depend on that. This is not a magic formula. You can't sway the future by putting these words in front of it. But what you can do is live and act knowing that God's already there. God is already at tomorrow, which means you don't have to worry. You don't have to stress. You don't have to work your way into some sort of security because God's already there. We depend on God, not on tomorrow, for our future plans. And this isn't like God's fancy biblical YOLO, right? It's really the exact opposite. It's not you only live once. It's since you only live once, act wisely. But as we keep tying that into this awkward thing called dating, you want to date with the future in mind, right? I keep stressing that, if you're going to date, the bad habits you have now are creating a pattern for your future, right? Depending on how you date now, you're either creating a strong marriage or you're practicing for your second divorce. And that's literally how important this is. And here's what I mean by that. Every decision you make needs to have the future in mind because your future is worth guarding. Little decisions add up to big things, right? Our decisions often have unforeseeable consequences down the line. We are all kind of familiar with the Titanic, right? The big famous shipwreck from over 100 years ago. There was a couple famous movies made about it. I've always been kind of a Titanic buff. When I was in first grade, my teacher had a book about this, and it was one of the first things I read myself, and I've been fascinated ever since. But beyond the iceberg, here's a little decision. There's a lot of little decisions in this chain, some big decisions in this chain. But on the night of the 14th of April, 1912, one of the watchmen assigned to the crow's nest, which is up on the mast, he had a problem. The binoculars he needed to keep an eye out for, say, icebergs, were locked away in a storage cabinet. And the key was missing. And the key was missing because right before the ship left port, the crew... Sorry? Jack didn't take it. Remember, he's imaginary. Right before the ship left port, that's why he's not on the wood with Rose, by the way. Right before the ship left port, the cruise company made a last-minute decision to replace the second officer, and the guy forgot to leave the key behind. So the key was in his pocket on the ground, and that's why someone couldn't get to the good binoculars and see an iceberg while it was far enough away. Little decisions. There were some bad decisions on the boat as well, right? But little decisions will add up to big things. So for me, focus. For me, 13 years ago, I had a friend call me who was doing a job interview at my home church. And it was still the pastor I'd grown up with. And so I called him, she didn't ask me to, but I called him to recommend her because she's an awesome person. He asked me if I was interested. I said no. I served on that staff for 12 years. It's where I met Faith. It's where we had Cole. A lot of my life happened because of one little decision to make one little phone call to help somebody who never asked me to help them. Right? Little decisions can, not always, but can turn into really big things. But when we take that back to dating, how do we kind of filter those decisions? We can ask questions like, can I see myself marrying this person? Now, before we get all love-eyed again in the month of Valentine's Day, remember your chances of marrying anyone you date this year are 2%. More real talk with Greg because I love you. Would they be selfless or would they be selfish? And I know some of you are like, I'm a junior in high school. Why are you asking me questions about marriage? And that's a great question because the answers to those questions will also affect how they treat you while you're dating right now. Right? If you date a selfish person now, they're going to treat you poorly now, probably. If you date a selfless person now, they're going to treat you well now, probably. The things you're looking for long-term are also the things that are helpful for you short-term, right? But also, dating someone gives them a chance to shape you, right? You know how when you spend time around friends, you just start to kind of, not consciously, but you start to pick up some of their mannerisms. You'll use the same phrases they use, start to like similar things to them, have the inside jokes, all of those things. Dating someone brings that into your life. You're giving someone a chance to shape you. Why would you want to let someone harmful shape you? Even if they're not trying to be harmful. There are great people that are not great for you. There are some people who are just awful and they really are good with hurting you, but there are some people who are good people who are just not good for you. And why do you want to bring that into your life? Because, friends, more real talk. That should be really the title for tonight. Dating equals conflict. Now, not every moment of dating is conflict, but anytime you have more than one person, you are eventually going to have conflict. And so you want to handle conflict the way God told you how to, right? It's biblical. It's good preparation for a godly life. You don't want to let things get too far. It's like every sitcom ever where they're married or they were dating and she made something and he faked liking it. So she's been making it for 30 years. She hates it. He hates it. And everybody's miserable but doesn't want to tell each other. Don't be that people. Handle conflict the way God told you to. Honestly, with truth, in the beginning, right? Or as Song of Solomon, arguably the most awkward book in the Bible, especially if you understand farming metaphors. Song of Solomon 2:15-17 says, "Catch the foxes for us, the little foxes that ruin the vineyard, for our vineyards are in bloom. My love is mine and I am his. He feeds among the lilies. Till the day breaks and the shadows flee, turn around, my love, and be like a gazelle or a young stag on the divided mountains." So we're going to ignore most of that and focus on this first part where it says, "Catch the foxes for us." Anybody here ever wake up one morning on a Saturday and they're like, I'm going to go catch a fox today? Anyone? Right. So let me unpack some 2,000-year-old agrarian symbology for you. Now there's 15 syllables for you. Catch the foxes for us, the little ones that ruin the vineyards. Here's the deal. The guy running the vineyard can already see the big ones that are trying to steal the grapes off the vine. But the danger is actually in the little fox pups that are gnawing on the roots of the vine. The farmer doesn't necessarily see it. It doesn't cause any of the grapes to fall off at first. But if he lets it go unchecked, the whole vine dies. And then he's out of luck. Right? And it's the same thing with relationships. The small negative habits are what eventually can ruin everything. So, and that can be from you, or that can be from someone else. That can be in a friendship, that can be dating. And that doesn't mean wait for a perfect person because you will be 101 years old and single. No one's perfect and neither are you. But what that does mean is when something is happening, you don't just let it build up until you explode. You deal with it in the beginning, the way Jesus tells us to, with love, with truth, with understanding, right? So, the future matters now. You can't depend on it, but you can prepare for it so that, like this whole month is titled, you don't have any regrets, right? Because these little things add up. 1 Timothy 4:11-16. Paul is writing to a teenage pastor named Timothy who says, "Command and teach these things. Don't let anyone despise your youth, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. Till I come, give your attention to public reading, exhortation, and teaching. Don't neglect the gift that is in you. It was given to you through prophecy with the laying on of hands by the council of elders. Practice these things. Be committed to them so that your progress may be evident to all. Pay close attention to your life and your teaching. Persevere in these things, for in doing this you will save both yourself and your hearers. Set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity." We are, even in this phase of life that's not everything we want it to be, we are still making progress towards Christ-likeness. And we want to do that in a way that points others to him as well, so that it's evident to all. So for some of you, you've never even encountered him. And so that's where this journey needs to start. You need to come face to face with Christ and the work he's done for you. For others of you, you just need to live out what you've committed to. And even if you have no regrets yet, keep on that course. And you can be setting an example in speech and conduct and love and faith and purity, even in dating. So that your progress is evident to all, so that everybody can look at the way you're living and say, like Paul did, "Follow me as I follow Christ." Let's pray. Jesus, we thank you that you are already in our future and that we can trust you. We thank you that you give us the ability to make decisions and that those can point people to you. And we thank you for the freedom you give us in this place to choose the people we spend time with. And I pray that we would use that well. God, that our friendships would honor you, that we could use them to build bridges to people who need to know you, that as we even look to dating, that we would do that in a way that pleases you. I pray that you would help us to do it all through the power of your Spirit, and it's in your name we pray. Amen.